The restaurant was quiet, filled with the soft clinking of glasses and the low hum of conversation. Every table was polished and spotless, the chairs neatly arranged, and the silverware gleaming under the warm lights. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries, mingling with the scent of perfume from the elegantly dressed guests. The place had an air of sophistication, a world where people spoke in soft tones and measured their laughter carefully. It was not a place where a young waitress like her felt completely at ease, but she had grown used to it over time. She moved through the tables with practiced ease, balancing trays of drinks and plates of food. Each step was quiet, precise, yet there was a careful awareness in her eyes. She noticed every detail, from the napkin slightly out of place to the tiny smudge on a wine glass. This attention to detail had earned her nods of approval from the manager and a few kind smiles from regular guests. But there were always those who looked at her with a quiet disapproval, judging her by her simple uniform and humble presence. At the far end of the room, a grand piano stood, polished and shining under the soft overhead lights. Its black surface reflected the chandeliers above, making it look almost like a jewel in the room. A few guests were gathered nearby, their conversations hushed, as if they had been drawn by the piano's silent promise of music. It was a centerpiece, elegant and untouchable, a symbol of wealth and refinement. The young waitress often passed by it, but she had never dared to play it while the restaurant was busy. It belonged to them, the elite who dined here, and she was just a server, a shadow moving quietly in the background. That evening felt different, though. There was a nervous excitement in the air, something she could not quite place. She carried a tray of fresh desserts toward a table where a small group of wealthy patrons had gathered. They wore designer clothes, expensive watches, and carried themselves with a quiet confidence that spoke of privilege. As she approached, she noticed their eyes flicking toward her, not with curiosity but with amusement. A quiet whisper passed between them, and a faint smirk appeared on one man's face. They were watching her closely, waiting, perhaps, for a moment to mock. She felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach, but she pushed it aside. She had learned to navigate such moments before, to move gracefully and keep her head down. But tonight, something stirred inside her. As she placed the desserts on the table, her hand brushed against the edge of the piano. It was smooth, cool, and inviting. For a brief moment, she felt a pull toward it, a desire to touch the keys, to feel the music beneath her fingers. But she knew the eyes of the wealthy patrons were on her. They were judging, expecting her to make a mistake, waiting for something to ridicule. She stepped back and tried to focus on her duties, but the pull was stronger now. She imagined the music she could create, melodies that had lived in her mind since childhood. She remembered the piano lessons she had taken long ago, the hours she had spent practicing in a small room at home, where no one had watched or judged. Those memories gave her courage, a quiet confidence that maybe, just maybe, she could play without fear. The patrons noticed her hesitation. One of them, a man with a sharp suit and a slightly condescending smile, leaned toward the others and whispered something. She caught a few words. "Just look at her. Can you believe she thinks she can play?" The group chuckled quietly, a sound that cut through her resolve like a cold wind. She felt her cheeks warm, a mixture of embarrassment and defiance rising inside her. They did not know her. They did not know what she could do. And in that moment, she decided that they would find out. She placed the last plate on the table and stepped back, her eyes fixed on the piano. The guests leaned forward slightly, sensing her interest, some exchanging small, incredulous glances. The air seemed heavier now, charged with anticipation. Her heart raced, but she moved slowly, deliberately, toward the piano. Every step felt measured, like walking a tightrope between expectation and courage. She could feel the eyes of the elite on her, judging her every move, and yet she continued. She could hear their whispers, low and mocking, but she did not stop. When she reached the piano, she paused, her fingers hovering above the keys. She took a deep breath, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingertips. The room seemed to hold its breath with her. The guests, who had been quietly sipping wine and chatting moments ago, now turned their full attention to her. Some leaned in slightly, curious, while others looked skeptical, perhaps even amused, as if they could already predict the disaster that might come. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the melodies she had learned long ago, the pieces that had once filled a small room in her childhood home with music and life. She remembered the feeling of her fingers gliding over the keys, the sound that had made her feel free, unburdened, and alive. Those memories gave her courage. She opened her eyes and let her fingers touch the keys, lightly at first, testing, feeling the resistance and the sound. A soft note filled the air, delicate and hesitant. The guests' whispers quieted, and some raised their eyebrows in mild surprise. She continued, slowly, carefully, letting her fingers explore the piano. The initial notes were simple, almost timid, but there was a clarity, a beauty that could not be denied. The room grew quieter, the air charged with a tension that was both thrilling and frightening. The elite, who had been ready to mock her, now watched with something closer to curiosity. As she played, her confidence began to grow. The melody became smoother, flowing naturally, as if the music had been waiting for her all along. She felt a sense of connection, a bond with the piano that seemed to respond to her touch. The wealthy patrons shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, their expressions changing from amusement to surprise. They had expected embarrassment, but instead, they were witnessing something unexpected. The young waitress, who had seemed small and unassuming moments ago, was creating a moment of magic in the middle of their carefully curated world. She did not look up. She focused entirely on the piano, letting her fingers dance over the keys with ease. The notes filled the room, flowing through the air like a gentle river, touching everyone who listened. There was no rush, no need to impress, just the music, pure and simple, rising above the whispers and smirks. For the first time that evening, she felt free, as if the judgment of the world could not reach her here. The guests were silent now, their initial ridicule replaced by a quiet awe. They had underestimated her, judged her by her uniform, by her position, by the world she came from. And now, they were confronted with the truth. Talent and courage could not be hidden forever. And sometimes, the most unexpected person could create the most beautiful moments. She continued to play, each note more confident than the last, until the music filled every corner of the room. The sound was alive, vibrant, and undeniable. She was no longer just a waitress in a uniform. She was a musician, a storyteller, someone capable of turning a simple moment into something unforgettable. And in the faces of the elite, she saw the surprise, the disbelief, and the dawning respect that came from witnessing something extraordinary. In that moment, she realized that it was not just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to herself that she was capable, that her talent and her courage mattered, and that she could step into the light even when the world expected her to stay in the shadows. And as the final note lingered in the air, the room holding its breath, she felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of triumph that was hers alone. The night had just begun, and already, it was unforgettable. She stood in front of the grand piano, her fingers hovering over the keys, feeling the cool, smooth surface beneath her touch. The restaurant had fallen silent, the usual hum of conversation and laughter replaced by a tense stillness. The guests, who moments ago had been whispering and smirking, now stared at her in a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Some leaned forward slightly, unsure of what was about to happen. Others, with their arms crossed and lips pressed together, seemed ready to mock, yet they remained quiet, captivated by the unexpected moment. Her heart pounded, but she focused on her breathing, letting the rhythm calm her nerves. She remembered the lessons she had taken as a child, the long hours spent practicing alone in a small room at home. Those hours had taught her discipline, patience, and the joy of music. She allowed her fingers to press down on the keys, letting a soft, tentative melody fill the room. It was simple at first, almost shy, but there was a clarity and purity in the sound that made it impossible to ignore. The initial notes seemed to surprise the guests. Some tilted their heads, as if hearing something familiar yet unexpected. The whispers had stopped, replaced by an attentive silence. The young waitress felt a spark of confidence. The piano responded to her touch as if it had been waiting for her, every note smooth and resonant. She moved her hands carefully, exploring the range of the instrument, feeling a growing connection between herself and the music. A man sitting near the piano, dressed in a sharp suit and an air of superiority, had been watching with a skeptical look. He had whispered to his companions earlier, mocking her audacity, yet now his eyes were fixed on her hands. A faint crease appeared on his forehead, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. He leaned back slightly, unsure of how to react. The other guests shifted in their seats, some exchanging glances that spoke of surprise, others leaning in, drawn to the melody that seemed to float effortlessly through the air. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence. The melody became richer, flowing more smoothly, carrying emotion with every note. It was not just a series of keys pressed in sequence. It was a story, a reflection of her inner strength and years of hidden talent. The guests, who had been ready to ridicule, could no longer find words. Their expressions softened, and some leaned forward, mesmerized by the unexpected performance. The whispers of mockery had vanished entirely, replaced by a quiet sense of admiration that no one had anticipated. She remembered the moments when she had felt small and unseen, serving tables and watching the world of wealth and privilege from a distance. Those moments had fueled her determination to excel in something that truly mattered to her. Now, as her music filled the room, she felt a sense of liberation. The piano allowed her to speak in a language that did not require approval or validation from anyone. It was pure, honest, and powerful. A soft smile appeared on her face as she realized the effect her music was having. The guests were no longer seeing a young waitress in a uniform. They were witnessing an artist, a person capable of creating something beautiful and moving. The notes swirled around the room, carrying a gentle energy that seemed to touch everyone present. The air was alive with sound, a stark contrast to the quiet judgment that had dominated moments ago. One guest, a woman wearing an elegant dress and delicate jewelry, whispered to her companion, "I never expected this from her." Her voice was soft, tinged with awe. The companion nodded, unable to tear his eyes away from the performance. The young waitress continued to play, her confidence growing with each passing moment. The melody took on subtle variations, exploring dynamics and rhythm, revealing her deep understanding of music and her natural ability to convey emotion through sound. The man who had been skeptical earlier now leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, eyes wide with surprise. He had expected clumsiness, perhaps an awkward attempt at melody, but what he saw was mastery. The way she moved her fingers, the control and expression in each note, spoke of someone who had dedicated countless hours to perfecting her skill. It was impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss. His companions watched in silence, their previous smirks replaced by attentive fascination. She did not stop to notice the change in their expressions. Her focus was entirely on the piano, on the music that seemed to flow through her like a living thing. The melody grew more complex, yet remained fluid and graceful. Each chord resonated in the room, filling every corner with warmth and depth. The guests, once ready to ridicule, now found themselves holding their breath, waiting to see what she would do next. Her fingers glided across the keys, a combination of practice skill and natural talent guiding every movement. The music seemed to speak directly to the hearts of those listening, bypassing judgment and preconceptions. The young waitress felt a thrill of exhilaration, a sense of being fully alive in that moment. She had transformed the atmosphere, turning the elite's sneers into admiration and respect. The performance continued, her music weaving a story of resilience, courage, and hidden potential. Each note carried a piece of her history, a reflection of the struggles she had faced and the determination that had brought her here. The guests, captivated, experienced a shift in perception. They had underestimated her based on appearance and occupation, but the truth of her talent could not be concealed. The piano became a bridge, connecting her world to theirs in a way words never could. She felt a quiet pride as she played, knowing that this moment was hers alone. The guests were witnessing it, yes, but the satisfaction came from within. The realization that she had the ability to command attention and evoke emotion through music was empowering. The whispers of doubt that had lingered in her mind melted away, replaced by confidence and a sense of purpose. She was not just a waitress. She was a musician, a creator, someone who could transform perception with talent and courage. The room remained silent, save for the music flowing from the piano. The guests listened intently, unable to look away, caught in the spell of the melody. Some leaned closer, others sat back, absorbing every nuance, every subtle shift in rhythm and tone. The young waitress continued to play, fully immersed in the moment, feeling the music as if it were an extension of herself. She had found her voice, and it was clear, strong, and undeniable as the final notes of the piece lingered in the air. A hush fell over the room. The guests, who had moments ago been prepared to mock, now sat in quiet awe. Their expressions were a mix of surprise, respect, and admiration. The young waitress remained seated at the piano for a moment, letting the silence wash over her, savoring the feeling of accomplishment and triumph. She had faced judgment and ridicule, yet she had emerged unscathed, revealing her true talent to a room that had doubted her. Slowly, the guests began to clap, softly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. The sound of their applause filled the room, a recognition of the skill and courage that had been displayed. The young waitress smiled, a mixture of relief and pride, knowing that she had not only proven herself, but had also created a moment of genuine beauty and connection. The music had spoken where words could not, bridging divides and transforming perception. In that moment, she realized the power of courage, of stepping forward despite fear and judgment. The piano had become a tool, a voice through which she could express herself fully and authentically. The guests, who had intended to ridicule, now saw her in a new light, a reminder that talent and determination often reside in unexpected places. The young waitress had faced the challenge, and she had not only met it but exceeded all expectations, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. She could feel the change in the room. The air, once thick with whispers and sneers, now vibrated with attention and curiosity. The guests, who had been ready to laugh, were now holding their breath, their eyes fixed on her hands as they moved across the piano keys. There was a sense of disbelief, as if they could not reconcile the image of a young waitress with the music filling the room. Yet, despite the shock, their admiration was growing, subtle but undeniable. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, gliding across the keys with a fluidity that made the melody soar. Each note was deliberate, filled with emotion, yet effortless in its execution. She let herself become fully immersed in the music, forgetting the audience, forgetting the judgment that had hung over her like a shadow. In this moment, it was just her and the piano, connected through sound and feeling, creating something beautiful and real. A soft smile touched her lips as she noticed the subtle shifts in the guests' expressions. Eyes widened in surprise, some mouths parted slightly, and a few guests leaned closer to listen, captivated. They had expected awkwardness, a clumsy attempt, and instead they were witnessing mastery. Her music told a story, one that words could not capture, and it resonated deeply with everyone present. The melody began to flow more freely, weaving through complex rhythms and harmonies, demonstrating not only skill but a deep understanding of the instrument. She could feel the energy in the room changing, a transformation from judgment to appreciation. The piano, once a symbol of distance and privilege, had become a bridge between her world and theirs. She realized that music had a power beyond expectation, a way to communicate truth and beauty that could not be ignored. One man, who had been particularly mocking moments ago, now sat in stunned silence, his face a mixture of surprise and respect. He had underestimated her, judged her based on appearance and role, and now he was confronted with undeniable talent. Others at the table shared similar reactions, their initial amusement replaced by quiet admiration. Some exchanged glances, as if silently acknowledging that they had been wrong to doubt her abilities. She continued to play, her fingers dancing over the keys with confidence and precision. The melody became richer, filled with subtle variations and nuances that spoke of experience and passion. Each chord carried emotion, each pause created anticipation, and each note resonated in the room with clarity and depth. The guests were no longer mere observers. They were participants in the moment, drawn in by the music, unable to resist its beauty. The young waitress felt a rush of exhilaration. For years, she had practiced in solitude, her talent hidden from the world, but now it was on display, undeniable and transformative. The piano had become her voice, expressing her inner strength, resilience, and creativity. She could see the effect of her music on the audience, and it fueled her performance, giving her a sense of purpose and connection. A woman in an elegant gown whispered to her companion, her voice filled with awe. "She plays like a professional, better than I ever expected." Her companion nodded, eyes wide, unable to look away. The young waitress smiled to herself, not out of vanity, but from the quiet satisfaction of sharing something she loved, something that transcended the barriers of social class and expectation. As the melody grew more intricate, the room seemed to hold its breath. Every note was a statement, a declaration of talent and courage. The guests who had once prepared to mock were now captivated, caught in the spell of the music. The young waitress could feel their attention, their admiration, and it strengthened her resolve. She was no longer merely a server. She was a musician, a storyteller, someone who could command the room with her skill and passion. Her fingers moved with precision, yet with an organic fluidity that made the performance feel alive. She experimented with dynamics, alternating between soft, gentle passages and bold, expressive chords that resonated throughout the restaurant. The contrast created a tension and release that held the audience in rapt attention. Every person present was aware of the transformation, the shift from ridicule to respect, and the young waitress reveled in the moment, fully embracing her talent and presence. The music carried a sense of narrative, telling a story of struggle, determination, and triumph. She could feel the memories of her past, the quiet hours of practice, the moments of self-doubt, the longing to be recognized, flowing through her fingers and into the melody. The guests, sensing the authenticity and emotion behind each note, were drawn in. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others leaned forward, captivated by the precision and beauty of her playing. A subtle smile appeared on her face as she noticed the small gestures of appreciation. A nod, a widened eye, a soft exhale of surprise. These were signs of connection, of acknowledgement from those who had once been dismissive. She continued to play, her confidence growing with every note, each measure more assured than the last. The piano became an extension of herself, a means to communicate beyond words, beyond judgment, and beyond expectation. The performance reached a peak, with her hands moving swiftly yet gracefully across the keys. The melody was powerful, filled with emotion and technical skill, captivating every person in the room. The guests, once poised to ridicule, were now fully absorbed, witnessing a transformation that was both unexpected and profound. The young waitress felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that she had not only played beautifully, but had also challenged perceptions and expectations. As the final notes lingered in the air, a hush fell over the room. The guests sat in stunned silence, absorbing the beauty and precision of what they had just witnessed. The young waitress remained at the piano, breathing deeply, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. She had faced judgment and ridicule, yet she had triumphed through her talent and courage. The music had spoken louder than words, leaving an impression that could not be ignored. Slowly, the silence was broken by applause, soft at first, then growing louder as more guests joined in. The sound was genuine, filled with appreciation and admiration. The young waitress smiled, a sense of accomplishment and joy washing over her. She had turned a moment of potential humiliation into one of triumph, revealing her true abilities to a room that had doubted her. The piano had become a stage for her talent, a medium through which she could express herself fully and authentically. She looked around at the guests, noticing the subtle changes in their demeanor. Their expressions had shifted from skepticism and ridicule to respect and acknowledgement. Some nodded quietly, while others whispered to their companions, sharing their amazement. The young waitress felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had not only shared her music, but had also left a lasting impression, challenging assumptions and breaking barriers. In that moment, she realized the power of courage, talent, and perseverance. She had stepped into the spotlight, despite fear and judgment, and had shown that true skill and passion cannot be hidden or underestimated. The experience reinforced her belief in herself, in her abilities, and in the transformative power of music. The young waitress had faced a challenge, and she had met it with grace, skill, and determination, leaving an unforgettable mark on everyone who had witnessed it. The last note lingered in the air, fading slowly as if the room itself had absorbed the music and held it close. For a moment, the young waitress remained seated at the piano, her chest rising and falling with her steady breaths. She could feel the energy of the room, the shift in the atmosphere, as the guests processed what had just happened. The laughter and whispers of ridicule had vanished completely, replaced by awe, admiration, and a quiet respect she had never expected to receive. One by one, the guests began to clap, softly at first, then with increasing intensity. The sound of their applause seemed to shake off the last traces of tension in the room. Some stood, some leaned forward in their seats, and a few even whispered compliments to one another, sharing their amazement. The young waitress felt a warm rush of emotion, a mix of pride, relief, and joy. She had faced judgment and mockery, yet she had turned it into a moment of triumph. The restaurant manager, who had been watching from a distance, approached her with a broad smile. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in his eyes, a recognition of not just her talent, but the courage it had taken to step forward and perform in such a high-pressure setting. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, nodding slightly, and she understood the message clearly. She had impressed not only the guests but also those who had seen her work quietly and carefully behind the scenes. A wealthy guest, who had leaned back in his chair moments ago with a skeptical look, now approached her with a mixture of awe and respect. He spoke in a quiet, measured tone, acknowledging the beauty and skill of her performance. Others in his group nodded in agreement, some offering tentative smiles as if unsure how to properly express their newfound admiration. She responded with humility, thanking them softly, feeling the warmth of genuine appreciation that was entirely different from the polite, surface-level compliments she was used to receiving while serving tables. The young waitress felt a moment of reflection. She remembered the countless hours of practice, the quiet evenings spent learning melodies, the moments of self-doubt when she questioned whether her efforts would ever be recognized. Every note she had played carried not only skill but also the weight of persistence, the proof of her dedication and love for music. And now, in this moment, it was all visible, undeniable, and impactful. She noticed a few guests whispering to each other, their expressions showing surprise and admiration. Their earlier judgments seemed to have evaporated completely, replaced by respect. Some of them had been ready to mock her, to assume that her place was only behind the counter, serving drinks and plates of food. Now, they were faced with the reality that talent and courage often reside in unexpected places, that the world could be surprised in beautiful ways when least expected. The young waitress stood slowly, her hands brushing over the piano keys one last time. She took a small bow, a gesture of gratitude and acknowledgement, and the guests responded with renewed applause. There was a sense of closure, a feeling that something significant had happened in that room, something that transcended the usual interactions of a restaurant or lounge. The performance had created a moment of connection, of shared emotion, that lingered long after the final note. A few guests approached the piano, wanting to speak to her personally, to acknowledge the impact of her music. Their words were sincere, expressing not only admiration for her skill, but also an appreciation for her courage and poise under pressure. The young waitress listened, responding with polite gratitude, feeling a deep satisfaction that went beyond the simple act of playing notes on a piano. She had communicated something meaningful, something that reached people on a level that transcended status, wealth, and appearance. The manager returned, suggesting that her performance could open doors beyond the restaurant. There was a subtle implication of opportunity, of a chance to share her music with a wider audience. The young waitress considered this, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The thought of stepping into a larger world of performance was both thrilling and daunting, yet the applause, the recognition, and the sense of accomplishment gave her courage. She knew she had the ability to rise to the challenge, just as she had faced the skepticism of the elite guests and turned it into a triumph. She looked around the room, observing the subtle changes in the guests' behavior. Their expressions had softened, their earlier haughtiness replaced by admiration. Some were nodding quietly to themselves, perhaps reflecting on their own assumptions and judgments. The young waitress felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her performance had not only showcased her talent, but also challenged the perceptions of those who had doubted her. It was a reminder that true skill and dedication could not be hidden, and that respect often came from witnessing authenticity and courage. A couple of guests approached her with genuine curiosity, asking about her background, her training, and the hours she had spent practicing. She answered honestly, sharing snippets of her story with humility, feeling a sense of pride in the journey that had brought her to this moment. The audience was no longer distant or judgmental. They were engaged, interested, and inspired by her dedication and talent. The young waitress realized that this connection, this shared understanding through music, was as meaningful as the applause itself. She returned to her duties after a moment, moving through the restaurant with a new sense of confidence. The guests watched her with renewed respect, some offering warm smiles as she passed by. The atmosphere had shifted, the balance of power and perception subtly altered by the music she had created. Her presence, once overlooked or underestimated, was now acknowledged in a way that felt genuine and lasting. As the evening progressed, she found herself reflecting on the experience. The performance had been more than a display of skill. It had been a declaration of her identity, her dedication, and her courage. The music had allowed her to communicate in a way that transcended words, to connect with people from a different world and leave a lasting impression. She felt grateful for the opportunity, knowing that this moment would remain with her, a testament to the power of talent, perseverance, and authenticity. The applause and recognition lingered in her mind even as she returned to her regular duties. She moved with ease and grace, her confidence evident in every gesture and smile. The guests who had once prepared to ridicule were now engaged, observing her with respect and interest. The young waitress understood that this evening had changed not only how others saw her but also how she saw herself. She had proven to herself that courage and talent, when embraced fully, could create moments of unexpected beauty and transformation. In the quiet moments between tables, she allowed herself a small smile, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. The piano, once a symbol of distance and privilege, had become a bridge, connecting her world with the guests in a way that was honest, moving, and transformative. The experience reinforced her belief in herself and her abilities, giving her a sense of purpose and confidence that extended beyond the restaurant. The young waitress continued her work with renewed energy and focus. Each step, each gesture, carried the quiet confidence of someone who had faced judgment and emerged stronger, more self-assured, and recognized for her talent. The guests, now fully engaged, offered smiles, compliments, and subtle gestures of acknowledgement, creating a sense of connection that went beyond the simple act of serving. The evening had become more than a shift. It had become a moment of personal triumph and shared admiration, a memory that would remain vivid for both her and the guests for a long time. The night carried on, but something had changed. The young waitress moved through the restaurant with a quiet confidence she had never felt before. Each interaction with the guests was tinged with acknowledgement, a subtle respect that had replaced the mocking glances of earlier hours. The piano, once a distant object of admiration and intimidation, now felt like a friend, a companion that had shared in her courage and revealed her hidden talent to the world. Guests approached her during the evening, some out of curiosity, some out of admiration. They asked questions about her experience with the piano, how long she had been playing, and where she had learned. She answered humbly, sharing small pieces of her story without exaggeration, yet feeling a quiet pride in the journey that had brought her here. The conversations were different from the usual polite exchanges with diners. There was genuine interest, genuine connection, and a recognition of her skill and perseverance. One couple, who had been among the first to whisper and mock her, now stood before her, their expressions softened. They complimented her playing, expressing surprise and respect for the beauty of the music she had created. Their words were sincere, a far cry from the condescension they had shown earlier. The young waitress smiled, accepting their compliments with grace, feeling the warmth of acknowledgement that came not from obligation, but from genuine appreciation. She reflected on how quickly perception could change. People had been ready to judge her based on appearance and role, yet within moments, they were capable of admiration and respect. It was a powerful reminder that talent and courage often lie hidden in unexpected places, waiting for an opportunity to be recognized. She realized that her music had created that opportunity, not through arrogance, but through authenticity and dedication. As the evening progressed, the manager approached her again, this time with a quiet excitement in his eyes. He mentioned that a few guests had expressed interest in her performing at private events, even in other venues. There was a sense of opportunity in his words, a subtle suggestion that this could be the beginning of something beyond the walls of the restaurant. The young waitress felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The thought of performing for a wider audience was both thrilling and daunting, yet the memory of the applause and the recognition she had received filled her with confidence. She moved back to the piano during a quieter moment, her fingers brushing the keys, testing their familiar texture. It was a comforting feeling, a connection to something she had loved for years. As she played a few soft notes, she noticed the subtle smiles of guests passing by, their eyes following the melody. The music seemed to flow naturally, carrying with it a sense of calm and satisfaction. She felt a deep connection to the instrument, as if it were an extension of her own voice, capable of expressing feelings that words could not capture. The young waitress thought about the lessons she had learned from her journey. She had faced doubt, judgment, and ridicule, yet she had discovered a strength within herself that allowed her to rise above it. The piano had become a tool, a voice through which she could communicate her talent, courage, and resilience. It had given her the chance to redefine how she was perceived and to connect with people on a level that transcended status and expectation. Some guests lingered after their meals, drawn to the quiet beauty of the music that still echoed softly through the restaurant. They watched as she played, appreciating not only the skill but the emotion she conveyed through each note. It was a moment of connection, a shared experience that had grown out of what could have been an embarrassing or humiliating situation. Instead, it had become a testament to courage, talent, and the ability to transform perception through action and authenticity. The young waitress felt a sense of gratitude for the opportunity she had taken. Stepping forward, despite fear and judgment, had allowed her to share a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. The experience reminded her that sometimes, the most meaningful moments in life come from taking risks, from embracing courage, and from trusting in one's own abilities. She had faced the elite's ridicule and had turned it into admiration, not through confrontation, but through the power of her talent. As the night wound down, she returned to her regular duties, but there was a new energy in her movements. The steps that once felt routine now carried quiet confidence. The guests who had observed her earlier performance continued to watch with appreciation, offering smiles and words of acknowledgement. Even those who had initially doubted her seemed to carry a newfound respect, their expressions reflecting a recognition that talent and courage could come from the most unexpected places. The young waitress paused for a moment, glancing around the room. She saw the subtle changes in the atmosphere, the way people interacted with her now differently. It was a small but powerful reminder that her actions, her courage, and her dedication had created a ripple effect. The music had not only revealed her talent but had also challenged assumptions, shifted perceptions, and connected people through a shared appreciation for something beautiful and authentic. She thought about the future, about the possibilities that had opened up as a result of this evening. There was a sense of hope, of potential that had not been there before. The recognition she had received was not merely for a performance, but for the courage to step forward and share her true self. The experience reinforced her belief in the importance of pursuing her passion, of trusting in her abilities, and of embracing opportunities when they arose. As the last guests departed and the restaurant quieted, she sat at the piano one final time, letting her fingers trace the familiar keys. She played softly, a few simple notes that carried a sense of reflection and gratitude. The music was a private conversation with herself, a way to honor the journey she had taken and the lessons she had learned. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a symbol of courage, talent, and the ability to connect with others through authenticity and dedication. The young waitress rose from the piano and walked through the emptying restaurant, feeling a sense of fulfillment and accomplishment. The night had been transformative, not only in the way others saw her but in how she saw herself. She had faced ridicule and doubt, yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and recognized for her true abilities. The experience would remain with her, a reminder of the power of talent, courage, and the willingness to take risks. As she closed the restaurant for the night, she thought about the journey ahead. Opportunities might arise, doors might open, and the recognition she had received could lead to new experiences. Yet, regardless of what the future held, she knew that the courage to step forward and embrace her talent had changed her. She had learned that true strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them, and that recognition and respect often followed authenticity and dedication. The young waitress walked out into the quiet night, the memories of the evening lingering in her mind. She had transformed a moment of potential embarrassment into one of triumph and connection. She had shared her talent, touched hearts, and altered perceptions, not through confrontation, but through the beauty of her music and the courage to step forward. It was a night she would never forget, a moment that would shape her future and remind her always of the power of talent, courage, and authenticity.